built his ark up on a hillside. Today, we have tsunamis, and we have a new part of our, vocabulary, mega tsunamis. And now we're not talking about waves that are 5 or 10 feet tall. We keep on TV, they're talking about waves that are hundreds of feet tall.
Yeah.
All right. And if you have a huge tsunami wave, and it's piling in, well, when it hits the harbor, what's it going to do? Same thing it did in the 2004 Sumatra superquake. It is like hydraulic sandpaper. It just grinds everything. Well, that's what happens in a mega tsunami. And that's what we're going to be seeing. And it was a tsunami that we were dealing with during the flood. Because as the water rushes in and completely devastates the harbors and low-lying areas, marshlands and whatnot, it's just going to start going uphill, right?
Right.
And as it's going uphill, it's losing its strength. It's losing its speed. And the ark, which is built up from the ground, the water would rush in underneath the ark. And so instead of the ark first encountering the tsunami wave along its sides or across the top, the wave is actually coming up from underneath. It's contacting the ark at the keel, lifting it up, and then, as all tsunamis do, suck everything back out to sea, including the ark. And that is the basic story. Now, what we found in the Kolbrin Bible is that it tells very much the same story as in the Old Testament, but with much greater detail. In the Kolbrin Bible, it is the story of Sesuda and Hanok. But they give us the same approximate measurements. And one of the things that we found with the Kolbrin Bible, in this account and other accounts, particularly the ones dealing with the Exodus, the 10 plagues of Exodus, is that when you read it in other books like the Old Testament, what's the purpose of the Old Testament? The Old Testament is really a living history of a people. It is their justification for being. All right? And so it has to flow and read with that in mind. What was happening was the Kolbrin Bible was completely different. It was more akin to what America did after 9/11. We had the 9/11 report. And we're trying to figure out, how did we get our tatas kicked? Okay? How did these guys get on the plane with box cutters and do this? Well, what happened was the ancient Egyptians were just completely out of their heads, trying to figure out how is it that the God of the Hebrews was more powerful than their entire, all of their gods put together. All right? Their gods are better than our gods. Or their God is better than all of our gods put together. They were trying to understand that. And so what happened was after the Exodus, while Moses was building the Ark of the Covenant and having the Torah written, going through that part of the Hebrew saga, the Egyptians were out there doing their own 9/11 report. And what they did was they said, look, we don't want to find the God of the Hebrews because they felt that the Hebrews had a lesser God. Just a lesser God that was more powerful than, obviously, their much lesser gods. They wanted to leapfrog all of that and go to the Creator. And so it was their search for the Creator, the all-powerful God. And they didn't find that, although they combed the waterfront, so to speak. And, what was happening is their scribes and their intellectuals during the day are, it's the business of empire, counting bricks and paying labor and what have you. But they were then starting to harvest all of the folklore and stories from all throughout their sphere of trading, their trading influence sphere. And all of this was coming back to Egypt, and it was compiled into an original work called The Great Book. And the Great Book was the size of a modern encyclopedia. What's left of that is, much less of it, only about probably 20% of the Great Book survived. And it was the rest of it went up when the Library of Alexandria burned. But parts of it were translated. And here's where the Phoenicians come in, because they had the greatest sailing fleet of the day. And so they could go from Lebanon to Great Britain in 4 weeks' time, because they were the first seafaring nation that could navigate by the stars. Everybody else had to hug the coast, and boy, that's a slow way to go. Well, they were hauling in Great Britain. What was the basis of trade in Great Britain? It was the Saudi Arabia of tin at that time.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we're at the end of the Bronze Age. And so they would go up, get the tin, and then they'd take things that the ancient Celts, the Brits up there, would want to have, and part of that was papyrus from Egypt. And one of the books in the Kolbrin Bible, it's called The Sons of Fire, is what we believe a last vestige of ancient Phoenician folklore. And it was the part of it that they loved so much that they took this thing with them, and they translated it into Phoenician. And this, again, is very important. A lot of people don't realize is that the English alphabet is based on the Phoenician alphabet. It was a 22-letter alphabet. And so it was therefore very easy to assimilate into for the Celtic culture. And they then there was the process of studying it, and it was widely studied. As a matter of fact, Romans at that time who were in England, their children were studying these ancient texts. And all of this information was cobbled together, and after the death of Jesus, was the Glastonbury Abbey was formed about 37 years afterwards. And this information went to the Glastonbury Abbey, and where it was studied. And then later on, the abbey was burned for, Rome was really ticked off. They were going, they're heretics. And so the King of England said, yep, let's torch it. And they torched it, killed a lot of priests. But the ones that survived took what they could find, what was left, and they took it on with them, along with another ancient text, and is called the Cole Book. And the Cole Book was written by the ancient Celts. The ancient Celts actually discuss Jesus in great depth in the Kolbrin Bible. It's the last book of the Bible, the Britain book. And I think this was the reason why there was contention, because the ancient Celtic Christians viewed Jesus as a prophet, not as a son of God. They rejected the trilogy. And so, or the Trinity, excuse me. And so consequently, politically, that's not going to set well with Rome, right? So that's it. You rewrite history by just killing it. It went underground and stayed up in northern England and Scotland in secret societies. See, a lot of folks don't realize a lot of the secret societies that are in existence today are the result of suppression. That you have state and you have church that use their power politically to suppress people by destroying what they have found, silencing them, burning them at the stake. We know the old song. Well, a secret society says this is really precious information. It belongs to everyone. So we're going to take it and make sure it's safe. But then what happens is they then evolve into the gatekeeper role, where they're so paranoid about how they protect the information, they're going to control it to the point where access to it is virtually impossible.
Right.
Now, the reason why the Kolbrin came out was that this was and this was a group in England, in Scotland, actually, that was actively working with it. The texts were continually being translated. In the Kolbrin Bible, we have a lineage of the languages and how it progressed. It was almost entirely destroyed during World War II, during the Blitz of London. The manuscript was in London. Now, interestingly enough, it wasn't a Nazi bomb that almost destroyed it. It was a fundamentalist housewife who started reading it and went, this is heresy, and she wanted to burn it. And so they snatched it away from her. I mean, it's like,